Hey guys, it's Grace from Graceful Books, and I am back with another video. So today's video is going to be something that I have never done before, so bear with me. I tried to make it as organized as possible. I have some notes next to me right now, and I have some books that I'm going to use for examples as well, and then of course the books that I'm going to be talking about as well. Also, another thing, this is going to be the first video where I try to talk throughout it without using words excessively. So if some of my wording is really weird and off, that is why. And also, when I get impassioned, my grammar and English tends to go out the window. So I'm sorry ahead of time. I began to notice this recently, and it's really bothering me. Also, just another disclaimer. Reword that. Just another thing. I wanted to say that this video is about An Ember in the Ashes in that series and how I started out loving it and how it deteriorated over time for me, and I'm going to tell you where I think it went wrong. And just a disclaimer, I do not have an issue with Sabata here. I realize that she's still technically a new author and she's still developing her writing style and her techniques and everything like that. So I'm not necessarily attacking her. I just think there are some things that went wrong within this series as a whole that I think needed work, and I also want to explain to everyone why I personally had a lot of issues with this series in the end. And I also want to say that in Ember in the Ashes, even though I ended up disliking the series as a whole, I still love and adore An Ember in the Ashes. I still plan on rereading this, I plan on keeping this book, and I still plan on screaming its praises, but odds are I will never recommend you continue on in the series because this book is perfect on its own, and I don't think you need to read a continuation of it. Just saying. So with all that out of the way, let's get into this video. So, also, spoilers. This video is going to be filled to the brim with spoilers for An Ember in the Ashes, A Torch Against the Night, and A Reaper at the Gates. I have read all three of these books, and that is why I'm filming this video. So if you do not want to be spoiled for any of them, click away right now because I'm going to go in depth about a lot of things within this video, so just prepare yourself or click away. So with all of that out of the way, officially, let's get into this video. So I want to start off by saying that everything went right for me in An Ember in the Ashes. That's why I highly praise it. However, things started going to shit in A Torch Against the Night. I have a lot of issues with how things were written, how things were portrayed, how characters were written in A Torch Against the Night, and how I feel like it kind of completely invalidated a lot of the plot in An Ember in the Ashes, which, since it's my favorite book, that just doesn't sit well with me. So the first thing I want to talk about is world building. For me, where this series went wrong is the world building. Now, the main reason I'm saying this is that An Ember in the Ashes kind of had a low fantasy vibe to me. There were, of course, elements of fantasy like the Ogwars. They're able to predict the future and they have extreme insight to things that are going to happen, and that's demonstrated in An Ember in the Ashes. So as a result, that was kind of a mystical element. And I do believe that Helene's singing ability was kind of hinted at in this book as well. And of course, there's tales of mythical creatures sprinkled throughout, and I believe Laia thinks about them or talks about them on occasion too. And then we also have the Nightbringer, who's introduced in this book as well, and that's kind of a mythical, fantastical element as well. However, I don't feel like the book was oversaturated, and as a result, I thought it was going to be low fantasy. I thought it was going to be just very chill, and for the most part, a lot of this book was going to be based in some sort of reality. However, that is not what happened. This book kind of tricked me into a false sense of security that, hey, there's going to be bits and pieces of fantastical elements. However, it's not going to be the main focus. And I'm going to just hold up a book that I think does this well, and a book that I personally love and adore, which is why I think I was so hyped and impressed by this, because these two books kind of gave me the same vibe and feeling, and that is The Winter's Curse by Rutkoski. If you haven't read this trilogy, It is considered low fantasy. It's not high fantasy by any means, but it has like a very fantastical and whimsical writing style. And that writing style and feeling is enhanced by the way that a lot of the context in this story and the content in it revolves around religion and mythology within those religions that are created, that Marie Rutkoski created. And as a result, the whole entire series ends up feeling very mythical and mystical, and it just has a nice overall feeling. And I really enjoyed that it was still grounded in reality in a sense. However, there were things that made it feel as though it were magical. And I really liked that. I thought it was very cool, and it just made the story develop on really well. And that's what I originally thought An Ember in the Ashes was going to be. But then A Torch Against the Night came and just blindsided me and was like, hey, that's not what's going to happen. So I got tricked into a false sense of security, thinking that this was the world that Sabaa here built in this is the world that was going to be carried on throughout the whole entire book and series. However, that is not the case. A Torch Against the Night, we were basically blindsided by race being real, jinns being real, ghouls being real, all these things. And if any of these things were talked about in An Ember in the Ashes, I didn't recollect them. I didn't store that information in my brain because I thought this was going to be a low fantasy series where these things weren't actually going to exist. They were just going to be thought about and maybe blamed for certain things that happened in it, but never really seen, like heard but not seen, essentially, is what I'm saying. I thought it was going to be along those lines. However, that is not what ended up happening. Wraiths and ghouls and jinns and all these things ended up being real. And then on top of that, we have superpowers and special abilities, which I'll get into that later on. I have something that I really just need to rant about in that context. And here's my thing. So as a result, a lot of the world building happened in this book. However, it felt very sudden, and I felt like I was thrust into it and not prepared. Whoa, okay, Siri went on and started recording me. Okay. However, I feel like I was thrust into this not really knowing anything. I'm so sorry about the lighting. I felt like I was thrust into this not really knowing anything because I was prepared to continue on in the world that was built in here, but then we kind of just get thrust into a world that is wholly new to us in this book, and I wasn't prepared for it at all. So I felt like I was reading just a completely different series, and it didn't feel like a continuation of An Ember in the Ashes. There were little things that made it feel like they were connected. However, the world itself changed completely in this, and it just threw me off. And I'm going to say that I know a lot of world building typically happens in the first book in series. However, I have seen an instance where it works out, where the first book kind of doesn't necessarily introduces you to the world, but the main focus of it is not world building. And the second book is where a lot of the world building happens. And I have read a series where I think this was executed well, so I'm just going to bring that out real quick. The series that did this really well for me is the Generations Trilogy by Scott Sigler. This is the first book within that trilogy. And I'm not going to say too much about this series, but I will say that the first book is very mysterious. What you're essentially learning in the first book is you're gathering a lot of information from the main character's perspective. You're learning about what she's seeing and what she's feeling, but you're not really learning about the world, essentially. You're learning about the characters and her and everything that you're being put through throughout this book. However, it ends with you realizing that, hey, this series has just begun and you're about to be thrust into a completely new world that you know nothing about and you're going to learn about in the second book. So you leave this book knowing that you're going to essentially be learning about the world a lot more in the second book. So I wasn't completely blindsided by the world building that happened in A Light, which is the second book. So I feel like Scott Sigler pulled this off really well. However, I don't think Tahir did it properly. But like I said, she's a debut author, so it's expected that it's not going to be perfect. I do believe that authors can develop and change. So I'm not going to completely write her off for that or anything like that. But I will say, I do think her series suffered because of that, because I was tricked into thinking this world was going to be the main focus, and then we kind of get thrust into a completely different world in this one, and I wasn't prepared for it, and I felt completely lost as a result. So the next thing I have an issue with is the characters. So in Ember in the Ashes, we start out with Laia, and she is portrayed as a coward and pretty much very weak, but as a result of becoming a spy for the Resistance, you kind of see her develop into a stronger character. She's not fully strong, she's not like fully brave by the end of the book. However, you see the possibility for development into a much braver and stronger character. And I was really enjoying that arc, and I thought it was beautifully done. And then we have Elias, who starts out really wanting to make a difference. He wants nothing. Well, he starts out not really wanting to make a difference, but he wants to get himself out of this cruel and corrupt world that he's a part of. He doesn't want to be a mask. He doesn't want to be a murderer. He sympathizes with all the people that the Marshals have overtaken because he was raised by tribal people. And so he has this sympathetic angle that makes sense. And as a result, he isn't necessarily a funny, go-lucky person. He's just a very sympathetic and kind person who is very strong and knows how to land a good punch, if you know what I'm saying. So he's this strong character, but he's also got this extremely soft side. And I really enjoyed that because I do sometimes feel like a lot of YA fantasy has the tendency to focus on male protagonists that are just rigid all around. And I enjoyed the fact that we had this male protagonist that was not that. He had some rough edges, but he wasn't necessarily like cold and edgy or things along those lines. So it was a very interesting thing. I really enjoyed that. I loved learning about him. And then we had Helene, she was one of the most aggravating characters for me in the first book. I didn't like her at all. I found her to be really hard to relate to because she has nothing in common really with Elias, except for that they both are at Blackcliff and they're both highly trained, good fighters, and they're trapped in this world. But the difference is she's not really sympathetic to anything. So I enjoyed the fact that we kind of had this insight to a character that is friends with Elias but has completely different standpoints and different viewpoints as Elias. So I enjoyed that as well, even though I didn't like her as a character. And then we had Keenan, who I never really had an issue with in the first book. I thought he was enjoyable, and I was anticipating a lot of character growth, especially when I realized he was going to be kind of a more central character in A Torch Against the Night. So I was looking forward to that. However, I feel like all of these characters that I just mentioned got completely ruined. And then, of course, I loved Izzy, and she dies in the second book. So there was nothing more to say about her, sadly. But, my main problem is that as soon as I picked up A Torch Against the Night, I could tell that Keenan was not Keenan. And I know that this is going to sound really weird because, I don't know, it's just, I could tell. It was like something clicked, and it was just, Keenan was not Keenan. He did not read the way he did for me in the first book, and he came across as very shifty and very hot-headed, things I don't remember him really being in the first book. I remember in the first book, he was very standoffish and kind of cold to Laia. However, he kind of grew a bit closer to her. So when it was revealed that he was the Nightbringer, that's when I was like, oh, so this is why his character changed. However, it's then revealed that Keenan never existed in the first place. So now, I didn't want to get into this now, but I'm going to anyways. For me, that completely destroys the plot of the first book. Now, hear me out. Keenan is Laia's handler, which means he is the one who gets in contact with her while she is spying on the Commandant. And he's the Nightbringer who is in contact with the Commandant, who wants all of the scholars to be annihilated and killed, and he's working with the Resistance as a spy, but then his spy, the girl who's spying on the Commandant, who is essentially her spying on the Nightbringer, who is essentially her spying on Keenan, it's very confusing. I don't understand how her spying on the Commandant benefited them at all. I do think there's maybe some things that could explain this, like Keenan was her handler, so if she came about anything that dealt with the Nightbringer, she could tell him, and then he could just completely make sure that it doesn't get to the Resistance at all, so nothing is really revealed in the end. And then another thing is, I was thinking that maybe because Laia is the final trial in the 4 trials, that he would think that she would die. So the problem with her would be completely eliminated. However, it's revealed that he did all this stuff so he could get the little armlet that belonged to her mother, who's the lioness. And it's made out of, like, starlight silver, which is something he needs to release his people. I don't know. The whole plot in general just seems really convoluted now that I think about it, just because I was expecting this to be grounded in some sort of reality, and then the genocide and all these things that were ripping my heart apart in A Torch Against the Night was revealed to be a plot from some mythical being. And that just ruined it for me. And I'm not sitting here saying, like, oh, yay, genocide. No, I'm not saying that by any means. I'm saying that it makes more sense for the Commandant and to have this visceral, horrible need to want to just completely annihilate a group of people, because that's something that's happened in history repeatedly. It's not something made up. But then in this, it's put into a fantasy element, and it's made to be about some fantastical beings wanting this to happen. And I just, like, if the Nightbringer is so powerful, just freaking do it. Just do it. I don't understand. I genuinely don't understand. And just kill Laia too. On top of it, just kill her. Like, what? I don't understand. It's not like he has all this power and ability. He could easily kill Laia. He could have killed Laia while she was trying to spy on the Commandant and just pass it off as her being overly punished. He could have told the Commandant, hey, this girl's spying on you. Give her a punishment that will just kill her entirely. This plot point of Keenan being the Nightbringer just completely ruins a lot of the plot. But then at the same time, if Laia is not the spy, then she doesn't run into Elias, and then Elias and her don't have a bond, and as a result, Elias might have won the trials, or Helene might have won the trials. I can't comprehend. I don't understand. It just feels like it completely invalidated the plot of the first book, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm missing something, because like I said, it's been a while since I've read these books, but to me, it just ruined the first book, and I don't like that, because the first book was the best book in the series, and that's not good. So, moving on from Keenan and that whole shebang, Laia and Elias changed, and not for the better, in my opinion. I don't remember if this character change and development happened throughout A Torch Against the Night, but I know that when I picked up A Reaper at the Gates, I didn't recognize the characters that I fell in love with. And all these orange tabs are me catching on to things that pointed at Elias or Laia doing things that were completely out of character for them. I understand that a lot of time passed between these two books, but as a result, we ended up missing a lot of major character development. So from this book to this book, it feels like you're reading completely different characters, and I don't like that. If there's going to be a lot of character development from this book to this book, and there's going to be a gap, please inform us of what happened in that gap, or do some exposition or some scenes to show it, because to me, it just completely ruined the whole entire thing and threw me out of the world that Sabathir had created. And not to mention, I didn't like the changes that were done for the characters. Elias talked about silencing someone, a tribal person. He thought about silencing a tribal person. You know, the people who raised him he talked about gutting one of them or something like that. And, okay, no, he didn't talk about gutting them. Someone said, I could gut you like a pig right now, and he said, I'd like to see you try, or he thought it. And in my head, I was just like, that is not Elias. What the heck? And then we had Laia just losing her crap every other page and getting super angry for no freaking reason. And then we also had her being this holier-than-thou hero. And in my opinion, that just... How did we get from this girl who's a bit of a coward and tentatively wants to become stronger to a girl who thinks she can take down the Jinn and a whole entire empire basically on her own with her brother? Someone explain to me how that massive change happened from book 1 to book 3. I don't understand. I can't comprehend it, because let's just talk about this. I mentioned this in my reading vlog. But there is a moment where Laia is trying to get her brother to create Seraph Steel. And if you don't know, Seraph Steel is this invincible metal that if you create your weapons out of it, it's high grade, high class weapons that are impenetrable and so on and so forth. It's like, you can't get anything better than that. So Laia gets her brother out of prison along with Elias when Elias dies, and it's to get her brother to make Seraph Steel for her people. However, she doesn't want to help the resistance. She wants nothing to do with the resistance. So if she wants nothing to do with the resistance, I don't understand what the whole purpose of this is. What is she even doing? What is her motive? What is her motivation? Who is she going to get to help her throughout this? It makes no sense, because Laia, you're not strong enough to take on the Jinn. You're not strong enough to take the Nightbringer on by yourself. It's just not realistic. And I know that it's fantasy, but you have to have some verisimilitude to make things seem realistic and more relatable. However, a lot of things that should have been more relatable and more in connection to our real world were just completely thrown out the window and made everything seem just completely unrealistic. And I did not enjoy that. It made me very mad, because what was Laia's plan if she wasn't going to help out the resistance, if she wasn't really going to use her people, if she can't really team up with the Mariners, if she definitely can't team up with the Marshals, and if she isn't really planning on working with the tribal people? I don't understand what her plan was. So that kind of just completely throws out the window all of these plot points that should have been really important, because really, what's her plan? What was all of this journey for if she's not really going to use her brother for Seraph Steel making? And then on top of that, she was very unsympathetic to her brother. Like, she, throughout the whole entire series, you have this feeling of she really loves her brother. She really loves him. And family is really important to her, especially considering that she lost all of them. And yet, she's sitting here not being sympathetic at all to her brother, who's very clearly suffering from PTSD after everything he went through in that prison. I mean, Elias, an extremely strong soldier, died in there, if that gives you any hint to how horrible it is. I can't comprehend the Laia from the first book being that cold-hearted and that selfish by the third book. I just can't. The character development was more like character regression, and I really didn't enjoy that. The only character that I felt developed in any way, shape, or form was Helene, and even then, she made some stupid mistakes that were very out of character for her in the third book, and I didn't even get 50% of the way through the third book. She already fell into a trap that the Commandant and the Nightbringer put in place for her, and for me, I was sitting there thinking, I caught this mistake. You should have been able to catch it, but she didn't. So, and then I went and read some reviews, and everyone else was kind of saying, hey, the author is just not giving the characters a break at all. And I kind of agree. No matter what, in A Torch Against the Night, no matter what, there's always something thrown in to throw things off and ruin things. And in the end, it's just going to get really repetitive. And I know that this series was originally supposed to be like a duology, and it turned into a quartet. So I understand that she had to add a lot more content in, but I feel like that just completely ruined it. It should have stayed as duology, and as a result, things could have made more sense, and it wouldn't have been as dragged out as it currently is. And all these mistakes would most likely not have happened, in my opinion, but they did happen. And then this also brings me to another point that I forgot to mention, but Laia's power, that came out of nowhere. It completely blindsided me, and it came in a moment of convenience. Essentially, her and everyone she was traveling with had to hide in these little baskets because marshals were doing a raid check or something like that to find Laia and all these people that were going to resist the martial rule. And they open the thing that Laia's hiding in, and it's this very suspenseful moment. And then they just shut it and pretend it's like she's not there. And it's because she turned invisible. Very convenient that in this moment she turns invisible. And I know you're gonna get on me and be like, yeah, but you just said like the author doesn't give them any breaks. Yeah, I said that, but also when you give them a break, make it not super convenient. Make it have some sort of struggle so that it's more realistic. But in this case, it wasn't really realistic. I feel like she used Izzy's death as a way to make it seem like it was an inconvenience and that it wasn't just completely lucky that she survived. But that didn't do anything. It ripped my heart out, but it didn't take away from the fact that Laia suddenly has an ability that came out of nowhere. I didn't enjoy that. And I know that Helene has an ability, but Helene's ability makes sense to me. I feel like we had insight to it from the start, so it wasn't as if it was sprung on us randomly. And I just find it really annoying that both the female protagonists both have powers. I kind of liked the fact that Helene, the one that I wasn't really rooting for, had an ability. And then I was looking forward to the fact that Laia was just going to be essentially a regular girl who didn't have an ability. But then she had an ability, and it made her powerful. All these things just really ruined the book for me. It felt convenient. It felt disordered. It just wasn't a good thing. So as a result, I ended up DNFing the series. I think the world building, the lack of plot or the issues with motive, and then the sudden shift from low fantasy to high fantasy, and then the extending of this from a duology or a standalone to a 4-book series also ruined it. And I just think there was a lot of planning that didn't go well for it. And I'm putting this out there right now because this is one of the things that irked me about Torching Us Tonight, is that Keenan's character changed for me. And I feel as though the main reason that happened is because Tahir most likely, in a spur of the moment, was like, hey, let's make Keenan the Nightbringer. And I have a feeling she didn't have that planned out in the first book, but while she was writing, it suddenly came to her to have Keenan be the Nightbringer. So because of that, it feels as though nothing was really planned out, and this is just a personal opinion. I know that not everyone's going to agree with that, but, that's how I felt. That's how it came across to me. And then also, we can talk about the fact that, oh my goodness, what was I going to say? Oh, geez, I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, anyways, you get my point. I had a lot of issues with how this series continued and how it went on, and I think a lot of things contributed to it failing for me. But that is all I really have to say at this point. I know this is a super long video, but I had to cover about three books in one video and talk about everything that I think went wrong with it. Tell me your thoughts down below. If I missed anything that you think was an issue, tell me as well. And also, if I said something that was wrong, or if I said something that was clarified and I just completely forgot about it, please tell me that down below as well, so I can maybe pin it or put it in a comment that I'll make myself and make little changes to, so people know that I know this now or something like that. That is all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome day, and bye.